The year is 480 BC. A shadow has fallen across the ancient world, a darkness born not of an eclipse, but of ambition and a thirst for vengeance. 10 years prior, at Marathon, a small Athenian force had humiliated the armies of the Persian king, Darius the Great. The defeat planted a seed of bitter resentment that festered in the heart of the empire. Darius vowed to return and burn Athens to the ground, a vow his son Xerxes would inherit as a sacred duty. Now that promise was due. From the vast plains of Asia to the sun-kissed shores of Greece, a storm was gathering, one that threatened to extinguish the flickering flame of Western civilization before it had truly begun to burn. This shadow belongs to one man, Xerxes, the King of Kings. He commands an empire that dwarfs any other, a sprawling colossus stretching from the Indus River to the sands of Libya. To fulfill his father's oath, he has marshaled the collective might of his 46 nations. This is no mere army. It is a military machine of unprecedented scale and power, a torrent of humanity over 1 million strong. To move this force, Xerxes bends the very landscape to his will. He orders a canal carved through the Athos Peninsula, sparing his fleet the treacherous cape that had wrecked his father's first expedition. He lashes the Hellespont Strait with a bridge of boats, 1 mile long, forcing the sea itself to submit to his passage. It is an act of supreme hubris, a challenge to the gods themselves. And accompanying this land-based Leviathan is a fleet to match. Over 1,200 triremes, the most advanced warships of their day, crewed by the finest sailors in his domain, Phoenicians, Egyptians, and Ionians. He has assembled the largest invasion force the world has ever seen, a force designed not just to conquer, but to overwhelm, to crush the very spirit of resistance. The fate of Greece hangs by a thread. The first point of impact is a narrow coastal pass known as Thermopylae, the Hot Gates. Here, a tiny coalition of Greeks, led by the Spartan king Leonidas, and his 300 royal bodyguards, makes a stand. For 3 days, this small band of warriors becomes an unbreakable wall of bronze and courage, holding back the full might of the Persian horde. Their defiance is a testament to the power of men fighting for their freedom. But courage alone cannot win the day. A hidden path is revealed, the pass is outflanked, and the heroic defenders are slaughtered to the last man. Thermopylae is a tactical defeat, but it becomes a moral victory, a legend that echoes across Greece, stiffening the resolve of those who remain. With the gateway to the south now open, Xerxes marches unopposed towards his primary target, Athens. The city that had masterminded the victory at Marathon, the epicenter of this rebellion. He expects to find a terrified populace begging for mercy. Instead, he finds a ghost town. The streets are silent, the homes abandoned. The prize he has crossed an empire to claim feels hollow, an empty victory. The city is empty on the counsel of one man, Themistocles. A brilliant, populist, and cunning strategist, he had foreseen this moment. Years earlier, he had persuaded the Athenians to invest a silver strike not in public handouts, but in a new, powerful navy. Now, he has staked their very survival on it. He had gone to the oracle at Delphi, which delivered a terrifying and ambiguous prophecy. Though all else shall be taken, a wall of wood will be your salvation. While others believed this meant the wooden barricades of the Acropolis, Themistocles argued a bolder interpretation. He convinced his people to trust not in their city walls, but in their wooden ones, the fleet. It was a staggering gamble, asking them to abandon their homes, their land, and their sacred places, and put their faith entirely in the ships and the sea. Enraged at being denied the submission of his enemies, Xerxes unleashes his fury on the empty city. He orders Athens put to the torch. The magnificent temples of the Acropolis, the heart of Athenian identity and piety, are engulfed in flames. This is the fulfillment of his father's vow, revenge for the burning of Sardis a generation before. The birthplace of philosophy, art, and the radical new idea of democracy is reduced to smoldering ruins. For Xerxes, it is retribution. For the Greeks, it is the ultimate sacrilege. From the nearby island of Salamis, the evacuated population of Athens watches in horror as the night sky glows with the fires of their burning city. They have lost everything: their homes, their possessions, their sacred temples, their land. Despair gives way to a cold, hard fury. All that remains of Athens, of their lives, of their hope, is the navy bobbing in the bay before them. The fleet is no longer just a weapon of war. It is the ark of their civilization, the last bastion of freedom in a world consumed by tyranny. Here, in the narrow straits between Salamis and the mainland, the fate of the West will be decided. As the acrid smoke from a conquered Athens choked the sky, despair settled like a shroud over the Greek commanders. The fires on the Acropolis were more than just the destruction of a city. They were a funeral pyre for Greek morale. Inside a cramped command tent on the island of Salamis, fear and anger boiled over. The flickering lamplight cast long, dancing shadows on the faces of men pushed to the brink of collapse. The fragile alliance, forged in the face of invasion, was beginning to crack. Many, led by the Corinthian admiral Adeimantus, argued furiously to abandon their position. Their logic was born of terror: sail to the Isthmus of Corinth, link up with the Peloponnesian army, and fortify a final defensive line. To them, defending the Athenian refugees and the remnants of their fleet in the shadow of the Persian armada was suicide. They saw only a tactical retreat to save the heartland of Greece. They failed to see it was a retreat that would surrender the sea, and with it, all hope. Looming just across the bay was the reason for their terror. The Persian fleet was a behemoth, a floating empire of over 1,000 warships. It was a multinational force drawn from every corner of Xerxes' vast domain. Swift Phoenician triremes, the masters of naval warfare. Powerful Egyptian ships bristling with marines. Vessels from the conquered Ionian Greeks, forced to fight their own countrymen. This armada wasn't just a military force. It was a statement of overwhelming power, designed to crush the very spirit of resistance. Against this floating city of war, the allied Greeks could only muster around 370 triremes. Many of their crews were now homeless refugees, men who had watched their own cities fall. The numbers weren't just stark, they were a crushing weight on the soul of every Greek sailor who gazed out upon that forest of enemy masts. But one man stood firm against the tide of fear: Themistocles of Athens. He was a new kind of leader, a populist who had risen not from noble birth, but by the sheer force of his intellect and ambition. For him, this was not just one battle among many. This was the culmination of his life's work. Years earlier, it was Themistocles who had persuaded a skeptical Athens to use a sudden windfall of silver from the state mines not on a public handout, but on the construction of a new fleet of 200 triremes. He had seen this day coming. He insisted their only hope lay not in retreat, but in fighting right where they were, in the claustrophobic confines of the Salamis Straits. He argued with a burning passion that here, in these narrows, the Persians' greatest advantage, their vast numbers, would curdle into their single greatest liability. His strategy was a masterclass in naval theory. The Greek triremes were heavier, sturdier, and equipped with devastating bronze rams. They were designed for a brutal, close-quarters fight. The Persian ships, lighter and more maneuverable, excelled in the open sea where they could swarm and board their enemies. But in the narrowest part of the straits, less than a mile wide, that advantage would vanish. Themistocles knew the local currents and winds intimately. He envisioned a naval traffic jam on a colossal scale. The cramped waters would prevent the Persians from bringing their full force to bear, forcing their fleet into a compressed, disorganized mass. Their ships would run afoul of one another, creating congestion and chaos that the disciplined Greek rams could exploit. turning the sea into a killing field. But his brilliant logic could not penetrate the wall of their terror. The Peloponnesian commanders, obsessed with the defense of their peninsula, saw only the risk of being cut off. Adeimantus of Corinth openly mocked him. Themistocles, at the games, those who start too soon are punished. The Athenians' sharp retort, but those who start too late are not crowned, only deepened the hostility. The argument reached a fever pitch when the Spartan commander, Eurybiades, exasperated and insulted, raised his ceremonial staff to strike the Athenian down. In a moment that would become legend, Themistocles stood his ground and calmly declared, "Strike, but listen." The sheer audacity of the statement shamed the Spartan into lowering his arm, but the damage was done. The council was on the verge of voting for a full retreat, a decision that would shatter the alliance and doom Greece. Leaving the heated tent, Themistocles stood alone in the cool night air, the angry shouts still echoing behind him. He realized that logical persuasion had failed. Reason was no match for primal fear. If the Greeks would not willingly fight in the place that guaranteed their victory, he would have to force their hand. He would have to force the enemy's hand as well. Now, only deception remained. He would have to resort to his greatest and most dangerous weapon, his cunning, duplicitous mind. It was a gamble of staggering proportions, one that would brand him either as the savior of Greece or its most infamous traitor. He summoned his most trusted servant, Sisinus, not a soldier, but a learned man, the tutor to Themistocles' own children. In the shadows, he gave him a secret and terrifying mission: to row across the bay, surrender to the enemy, and demand to be taken to the Persian camp to deliver a personal message to King Xerxes himself. The message was a lie, a falsehood so audacious, so perfectly crafted, it could either lure the Persian fleet into a fatal trap and save Greece, or it could expose the Greeks' desperation and condemn them all to annihilation. Brought before the great king, surrounded by the splendor and menace of the Persian court, the humble tutor would deliver his master's poison. He would tell Xerxes that his master, Themistocles, commander of the Athenians, was a secret sympathizer to the Persian cause. He would claim that the Greeks were in a state of utter panic, hopelessly divided and planning to scatter and flee under the cover of darkness. He was to insist that if Xerxes acted now, he could block their escape and destroy them with ease. It was a message designed to be irresistible, a piece of bait perfectly sculpted to appeal directly to the king's monumental arrogance and his impatient desire for a quick, final, and glorious victory. It confirmed everything Xerxes already believed about the fractious and cowardly Greeks. He brushed aside the cautious counsel of advisors like Queen Artemisia, who warned him against a risky battle in the Narrows. This message was what he wanted to hear. Convinced he was about to trap a fleeing and terrified enemy, Xerxes gave the order. Under the cloak of night, the might of the Persian navy began to move, sealing both ends of the straits. The trap was being set. But the great king, in his hubris, had no idea that he was the one about to walk into it. Inside the great king's command center, the air was thick with arrogance and anticipation. The ashes of Athens were still warm, a testament to Persian might. Xerxes, the king of kings, sat surrounded by his highest-ranking commanders, men whose fortunes were tied to his favor. They saw the remnants of the Greek fleet bottled up in the Bay of Salamis, not as a threat, but as the final, cornered prey. Most of his commanders, their voices ringing with sycophantic confidence, urged an immediate, overwhelming attack. They smelled blood in the water, the final death throes of Greek resistance. They spoke of glory, of finishing the war in one decisive blow, and of the rewards that would surely follow. To them, caution was just another word for cowardice. But amidst the chorus of war hawks, one voice dared to dissent. Queen Artemisia of Halicarnassus, a Greek by birth but a loyal and formidable ally to the Persian Empire, stepped forward. She was a seasoned naval commander, a woman who understood the sea and the men who fought upon it better than any of the land-based generals in the room. With a steady hand, she pointed to the treacherous geography of the Salamis Straits. She argued that in such a confined space, the massive Persian fleet would become its own worst enemy. Their superior numbers would mean nothing. Ships would foul each other's oars, commands would be lost in the chaos, and they would be unable to bring their full force to bear. She warned Xerxes that the Greeks, in their element, would turn the Narrows into a killing ground. Her words were met with scornful silence and sideways glances. To the Persian nobles, she was not only a woman, but a Greek. Her caution was easily dismissed as disloyalty or feminine weakness. But Xerxes was not a man who favored caution, especially when his pride was on the line. He had already received Themistocles' secret message, the perfectly crafted lie that the Greeks were divided and preparing to flee under the cover of darkness. He believed Artemisia's warning was irrelevant. He wasn't attacking a prepared enemy, he was simply closing the net on a panicked rabble. Her sound naval strategy was overruled by his own hubris and the whisper of a traitor. He saw a chance to annihilate the entire Greek navy in one fell swoop, a victory so total it would be sung for 1,000 years. He dismissed her wisdom with an imperious wave of his hand and gave the order. The fleet was to move immediately, to seal the straits and crush the Hellenic dream forever. Under the cloak of a moonless night, the colossal Persian war machine stirred. A forest of masts and a cacophony of creaking wood and shouted commands filled the air as hundreds of triremes slipped their moorings. The main body of the fleet, a seemingly endless armada, began the arduous task of rowing into the eastern entrance of the straits. Simultaneously, Xerxes dispatched his formidable Egyptian contingent on a long, sweeping maneuver to circumnavigate Salamis Island and block the western channel, cutting off any possibility of escape. All through the night, the Persian crews rowed, their muscles burning, their bodies slick with sweat. They were driven by the whips of their masters and the promise of a swift victory at dawn. With every stroke, they packed themselves ever tighter into the narrow channel, unaware they were the ones being led into a cage. By the time the first hints of light touched the sky, the Greek retreat was now impossible. The trap was set. While the Persians toiled, the Greek commanders continued their bitter, divisive debate. The Peloponnesians, led by the Spartan Eurybiades, argued fiercely for a retreat to the Isthmus of Corinth to make their stand on land. Themistocles countered, knowing that to abandon the sea was to abandon Greece itself. The alliance was at its breaking point. Then a figure slipped out of the darkness and into the council tent. It was Aristides, Themistocles' greatest political rival, a man exiled from Athens by Themistocles' own decree. He had risked his life, slipping through the massive Persian fleet in a small boat to bring the startling news. They were completely surrounded. The Egyptian fleet had blocked the western passage. There was no escape. A stunned silence fell over the council. In an instant, the bickering ceased. The arguments of Spartans, Corinthians, and Athenians evaporated. Their debate was over. Aristides' news had forged a grim, unbreakable unity. Their only choice was to fight or to die together. Hearing Aristides' report, a flicker of something unreadable passed through Themistocles' eyes. It was the look of a master strategist, a gambler who had staked everything on a single audacious bluff, and had just seen his opponent take the bait. His plan, born of a profound understanding of both Greek division and Persian arrogance, had worked to perfection. He had used his enemy's pride as a weapon against them, and his allies' fear to forge them into a sword. He had turned cunning into a force more powerful than any army, not with swords or spears, but with a well-crafted lie whispered in the dark. The fate of Western civilization rested on his shoulders, and in this quiet moment before the storm, he knew he had given his people a fighting chance. As the sun rose, it revealed a breathtaking scene. High on the slopes of Mount Aegaleus, Xerxes sat upon a golden throne, ready to witness what he believed would be his fleet's final glorious triumph. Below him, the straits were choked with his warships, a chaotic, disorganized mass of tired men and tangled ships. And then, a sound began to echo across the water. It was the paean, the sacred Greek war hymn, a defiant song of freedom rising from the throats of thousands of men who had rested through the night. On Themistocles' signal, the Greek triremes, fresh and in perfect formation, began to emerge from the bays and coves of Salamis. They were fewer in number, but they were disciplined, motivated, and fighting for their homes. Their bronze-clad rams, designed for this very purpose, gleamed like predatory teeth in the morning sun. The trap was sprung. The battle for the future was about to begin. The battle began. Inspired by his bravery, the entire Greek line surged forward. The Greek strategy proved brutally effective. Their heavier triremes, built for ramming, punched through lighter Persian hulls. Xerxes' cramped trap had become a killing jar. Persian numbers became their greatest weakness, as ships collided and impeded one another. Rammed, disabled ships were boarded. The battle became a bloody melee of sword, spear, and shield. Faced with destruction, Queen Artemisia made an audacious decision. She rammed a friendly vessel to clear her escape path. From his throne, Xerxes watched in growing horror. Seeing Artemisia's action, he remarked, "My men have become women, and my women, men." The sea itself became a weapon. The Greeks, strong swimmers, could make for shore. Many Persian crews from inland could not. This was the day the Persian fleet drowned in hubris. The fear that had once gripped the Greeks now took hold of the great king. He and his entire land army would be trapped. The hunter had become the hunted. The sea became Greece's battlefield, and on that field, the Greeks had proven to be the undisputed masters. The victory secured the future of Athens and its fledgling democracy, ushering in a golden age. This cultural flourishing was made possible by the freedom secured in the narrow straits. The concepts of democracy and individual liberty, saved at Salamis, would be inherited by Rome, rediscovered in the Renaissance, and inspire the modern world. Subscribe for more epic history battles every week.